Hey everyone, today we're diving into something truly sobering, the Stickney case. This was one of those stories that operates on two totally different but completely intertwined tracks. On the one hand, we've got the very real, heavily documented tragedy of the Stickney family, a frankly devastating interstate custody battle. And on the other track, there's a meticulously constructed constitutional mock trial that actually followed it. So we're going to explore both here, the documented reality and the legal simulation that was designed to test exactly how our justice system should react when its own institutions completely fail. To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to consider a pretty profound question right off the bat. What is the actual cost of institutional silence? I mean, picture this. It's November 2021. Corey Stickney comes home to a totally empty house in Butler County, Kansas. There's no note, there's no court order, just complete and utter absence. And that one single moment, it sparked a grueling 5-year journey documenting a staggering multi-agency systemic failure.
Okay, let's lay out the factual foundation of what actually happened that day. On November 5th, 2021, Corey's 3 young kids, Charlie May, who was 4, Callie Joe, 3, and little Christian Allen, who was just 1 year old, were abruptly transported all the way to Nebraska by their mother, Andrea. Now, what makes this moment so catastrophic is the absolute lack of legal process. There was no divorce pending and absolutely zero court order granting Andrea sole custody. Under the law, both parents fully retained equal custodial rights.
And here's where we see just a massive catastrophic gap between how the authorities view this and what the law actually says. When Corey was frantically pleading for help from local cops, the Department for Children and Families, and even federal agencies, he was met with this uniform dismissive response. They just shrugged and called it a civil matter. But look at Kansas Statute 21-5409. Taking and concealing a minor child to deprive the other parent of their rights is an aggravated interference with parental custody. That's a severity level 8-person felony, people. We're talking actual prison time. So calling a felony kidnapping a civil matter wasn't just some harmless judgment call. It was a devastating legal error. Because the authorities flat out refused to act, this huge jurisdictional black hole opened up. And it dragged on for years. You can see it here. In 2021, the initial abduction happens. By 2022, Corey files a formal petition with the Department of Justice begging for federal intervention, and that goes literally nowhere. In 2023, brief contact reveals some pretty severe alienation tactics. And then finally, in 2024, the whole situation explodes into a severe criminal indictment. It's a multi-year ordeal where state lines became literal barriers to enforcement, and it left those young kids completely unprotected. 2. I really want that number to sink in. 2 full years. That's how long the children spent in complete concealment up in Nebraska. For 2 entire years, Corey Stickney had absolutely no physical contact with his kids. None. And during that whole time, Nebraska authorities were basically operating in a total jurisdictional vacuum. They completely failed to cross-reference Kansas records or even verify the custodial status of these kids. Just 2 years of total institutional blinder. By late 2023, there was this tiny, fleeting window of video contact. And during these calls, Corey made a really chilling discovery. Andrea's new romantic partner, a guy named Jeffrey Todd Slife, was living in the home, and the kids were actually being instructed to call him Dad. So this wasn't just physical distance anymore. This was calculated parental alienation. It's a deliberate pattern, right, designed to systematically destroy a child's relationship with the targeted parent using false narratives and emotional manipulation. And the kicker, right after Corey discovered this, all communication was abruptly and permanently blocked.
Systemic collapse and escalation.
Look, administrative negligence isn't just paperwork. It has a devastating real-world price. We're moving from bureaucratic red tape straight into undeniable consequences here. In June 2024, the situation turned violent, and it resulted in 13 criminal counts being filed against that same romantic partner, Jeffrey Todd Slife. And these were not minor charges, guys. We are talking about aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and aggravated child endangerment against the adult and the 3 Stickney children. The exact same children the state refused to check on were now the named victims of severe felony violence. The administrative response to all these red flags beforehand, it's honestly staggering. Way before the violence broke out, Corey Stickney had actually contacted the Kansas Department for Children and Families. He found out there were already multiple official reports of severe abuse and neglect involving his kids and Slife. So how did the DCF handle those prior warnings? They just marked them unsubstantiated and administratively closed the files. Talk about a profound contrast. You've got administrative neglect on one side and a 13-count felony indictment on the other. The system completely failed to recognize the danger until it literally became a violent crime scene.
Section 3, the Constitutional Mock Trial. So, with that documented reality in mind, legal architects looked at this entire 5-year nightmare of ignored reports, and they built a legal simulation to really test the system. The whole mock trial rested on this one vital legal concept: nonfeasance. Basically, it's the failure to act when action is legally required. We're not talking about a mistake or some accidental oversight here. It is a conscious, deliberate choice not to act when the law explicitly demands that you do. The core argument was that the inaction by local police, the DCF, and the DOJ wasn't just a fluke. It was an unconstitutional, systemic departmental policy of non-response. To prosecute this kind of deliberate inaction, the legal simulation built its case on 3 massive pillars. First up, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. That deals with the willful deprivation of constitutional rights under the color of law. Second, the 14th Amendment, which protects a parent's fundamental liberty interest in their children through due process and, of course, demands equal protection. And third, the Kansas mandatory custody statutes themselves. These pillars weren't just abstract legal theories. They formed an ironclad trap, a rigid framework specifically designed to hold both the state of Kansas and the federal Department of Justice completely accountable.
Now, you might be thinking, normally the government doesn't actually have a constitutional duty to protect you from private harm, right? But, and this is a big but, there is a vital loophole called the special relationship exception. It comes from the DeShaney case. Because the Kansas custody statutes use the word shall enforce, not may enforce, not should enforce, but shall, the state assumed a mandatory protective obligation. So by failing to act, they didn't just make a bad judgment call, they committed a literal constitutional deprivation.
The mock trial used this incredibly precise legal strategy, leveraging what's called the Monell framework, to completely bypass individual qualified immunity. Instead of trying to sue one specific officer who would probably just be shielded by that immunity anyway, they went after the agencies themselves. They essentially proved that years of consistent, deliberate indifference formed an unwritten but very real institutional policy of ignoring the law. The whole prosecution was designed to hold the entire institution accountable for its collective silence. Section 4, Surveillance and Affirmative Harm. As our timeline rolls into 2025, the state's role shifts from passive neglect into affirmative, active harm directed right at the father. The mock trial dossier actually revealed evidence of state surveillance operations targeting Corey. We're talking corroborating technical logs and warrantless monitoring of his digital communications. I mean, that is a massive Fourth Amendment privacy violation. But wait, it gets worse. The court found this surveillance was specifically deployed to destabilize his legal advocacy. Weaponizing surveillance against a parent who's just trying to use the legal system to find his kids, that is a direct, undeniable violation of his First Amendment right to petition the government. The state was actively retaliating against him. Finally, the price of silence. So, the mock trial basically asked the legal system to put a precise compensatory dollar amount on this huge multi-jurisdictional failure. Ultimately, the mock court awarded a total of $25 million in damages, and you can see how they distributed that constitutional accountability perfectly across the agencies here. $10 million was assessed against the Federal Department of Justice, $5 million against the state of Kansas, and another $10 million in joint liability between the two of them. Now, breaking this down, this wasn't just some random payout. Every single dollar mapped directly to a specific constitutional injury. Corey Stickney was awarded $10 million from the DOJ for their federal statutory failure. Callie Jo, one of the daughters, received $5 million from Kansas for that 14th Amendment due process breach we talked about. Christian Allen got $5 million in joint liability for equal protection deprivation. And Charlie May received $5 million for the sheer distress of the unwarranted surveillance. The court wasn't compensating them for lost income or anything like that. This was for profound dignitary harms and formative constitutional injuries. Look, when agencies are given a mandatory obligation to protect, and they just choose to ignore it, while a family is literally torn apart and put in danger, accountability has to exist. Yes, this mock trial might be a simulation, but the documented deprivations and the absolute silence of those real-world institutions, that is an absolute reality that demands scrutiny. Just before we wrap up today's explainer, it's really crucial we read the mandatory disclosure from our source material to draw a clear line between the events and the analysis. It states,
This explainer examines both a documented interstate custody case and a structured mock trial proceeding built from that case's factual record. All case citations, constitutional frameworks, statutory references, and legal doctrines discussed are real and operative in American law. The mock trial is a constructed analytical exercise designed to test constitutional principles, which leaves us with one final, deeply sobering thought. When the very institutions sworn to protect our most vulnerable simply choose silence, what exactly does the legal system owe when it fails? Thank you so much for joining me. Keep asking the tough questions.